once upon a time, not 1,000 miles from here, there lived a poor old woodcutter and his little daughter. He was a widower, and they lived alone out near the woods. They were very poor. And the old man used to go out into the woods and cut wood and trim it and wrap it up in a bundle and throw it on his back and come back and have a little lunch at his house and then go to market and sell his wood. And sometimes he found a buyer and sometimes he didn't. One evening, after he had come back from selling his wood, his little daughter said to him, Father, I've heard about all these different kinds of foods that people eat. They have, baklava and grapes and all kinds of wonderful things. And all we ever eat is old rice and dried dates. And I'd really like some new and different things to eat, please. And the old man loved his daughter very much, and he wanted to do the best for her. So he said, okay, daughter, tomorrow I'll wake up much earlier than I usually do. And I'll go further back into the woods where there's really nice wood. And with the extra time, I'll cut an extra half load of wood or so, and then come back and be at the market early, because if I'm early, it's always get a good buyer. And with the extra money, I'll buy you some new and different food. So the next morning, the old woodcutter got up and he walked deep into the forest where he knew there was some choice wood that couldn't dry, ready to work. And he spent the morning cutting and trimming and wrapping into a bundle. Then he came back to his house, and he was much earlier than usual because he got up so early. And he knocked on the door. Daughter, open the door. I got the wood and I need something to eat. I'm ready to go to town and sell the wood. But it was still very early, and his daughter was a very sound sleeper, and she didn't hear him, and the door was locked, of course. And, well, he thought to himself, well, really would like something to eat here, and it's kind of actually getting a little late, so maybe I'll just spend the rest of the day cutting more wood, and tomorrow I'll take a double load of wood to the market, and that way I'll earn money. So he took his axe and walked back into the forest, cut another load of wood, and spent the day there doing that. And when he was finished, he came back and he put that bundle by the other bundle there and knocked on the door. Daughter, please, I'm hungry, thirsty, and very tired, and I'd like something to eat. I'd like to get in my house and go to sleep. But the daughter had gone out for a walk and locked the door, and the old woodcutter, said, I don't know what I should do. So he put all the wood back in the woodshed. He was very tired and hungry and thirsty. He laid down on top of the wood, and before he knew it, he was asleep. And the daughter came home, and not seeing her father, assumed he had arranged to spend the night in town, as he sometimes did. Well, the very next morning, before it was even light, the old woodcutter woke up next to his wood there. He was uncomfortable, of course, sleeping on all that wood, and he was, hungry and thirsty. And all of a sudden, out of the dawn, he thought he heard a voice. And it said, old man, leave your wood and come this way. So he got up and he walked in the direction he thought the voice was coming from. And he walked and he walked. And pretty soon the sun came up. He could see where he was. And he was in a part of the forest that he'd never been in before. Well, it didn't set very well with him. Here he is, cold, tired, hungry, and now he's lost in the woods. And he wasn't very happy. In fact, he thought about crying, but that wouldn't do any good. So So he thought he'd tell himself, as if in a story, all the things that had happened to him since his daughter had asked him for new and different things to eat. And as he was telling his story, a voice, very much like the old voice he heard before, said, "Old man, what are you doing there?" He said, "I'm telling myself my own story." "What would that be?" said the voice. So the old woodcutter related his story, and the voice said, "Oh, I see, yes. I want you to close your eyes, stand up, and walk up the staircase." He says, I'm in the woods, there's no staircase here." "Never mind," said the voice, "just do what I say." So he closed his eyes, stood up, and put his foot up, and sure enough, there was a step there. Put his other foot up, and there was another step. And as he started to ascend the staircase started to move very fast. And the voice said to him, "Old man, don't open your eyes until I tell you to do so." After a short time, the voice said, "You may open your eyes now." And he found himself in what looked like a desert. No trees, just hills, and rocks, and pebbles, all over pebbles, all kinds of pebbles. The sun was blazing down on him. He didn't know where he was. Around. And the voice said, "Old man, I want you to pick up as many of these pebbles as you can and put them in your pockets." The woodcutter picked up the pebbles and put them in his pockets, because what else was there to do, really? And the voice said, "Now close your eyes and go down the staircase." So he closed his eyes and he put his foot down, and sure enough, there was a step there. Put his other foot down, and there was another step. And as he descended the staircase, it started to move very fast. And the voice said, "Do not open your eyes until I tell you to." And after a short while, the voice said, "You may open your eyes now." He opened his eyes to find that he was standing in front of the door of his own house. Oh, well, he knocked on the door. Daughter, open the door, please." And she opened the door and said, "Where have you been?" And he tried to explain to her what had happened, but it really didn't make much sense to her. Well, that night they ate the last of their food, which was some rice and dried dates. And while they were eating their meal, a voice, very much like the voice he heard before, said, "Old man, you have been saved by the work of Muskil Gusha. Muskil Gusha is the remover of all difficulties, and know that all your difficulties have been removed by the work of Muskil Gusha. But what you must do is on Thursday nights tell the story of Muskil Gusha to someone who will help the needy and maintain the story of Muskil Gusha in their lives. And in this way, the people who are in real need will always find their way." Well, his daughter didn't seem to have heard this voice, so he didn't make much of it. But they went to sleep that night. And the next morning, he took that double load of wood to the market. Got right up there to the street where the bakeries are, and the baker said, "Oh, old man, look at that wood. You're just in time. I have to do 2 weddings today, and I have a lot of baking to do. And that's really excellent wood. I'm going to pay you a little extra for that there, you know." And so the old man stopped by and bought some. What did he buy? Well, let's see. He got some sourdough things, you know. A bunch of grapes. A few other things. Went home. And that evening, he and his daughter were eating their food, and he was kind of sitting on something, and it was all these pebbles that he had collected, which he kind of thrown in the corner there, you know. Didn't think much, put them over there, didn't think much of them. So then the old man told his daughter, "You know, we have been saved by the work of Muskil Gusha to remove all difficulties. We must always remember his name and to tell his story on Thursday night, in this way the people who are came down to his house and they knocked on the door. He answered the door and said, "Yes, neighbors." And they said, "Our fire has gone out and we need to light a fire." And he says, "I don't have a fire." They said, "Well, we saw through your window all this light coming out of your back room there." He said, "Oh, just a minute." And he went and looked where he threw the pebbles, and they had turned into precious luminous gems, which were shining with a light of their own. But it was a cold fire, and you couldn't have a light of it, so he went to the neighbors and said, "No, I'm sorry, I have nothing for you." Shut the door on them. And the neighbors went away muttering, but they leave our story here. Well, the old woodcutter gathered up the gems. He and his daughter looked at them that evening and they devised a plan. And they traveled from town to town, and in each town had a jeweler, and they sold the gems for a very, very good price. And the woodcutter was thinking, well, I can buy a donkey now, but I have enough money. But when he looked at all the money he had made with these gems, he found out he was quite wealthy. So he decided to build a house for his daughter and himself. And he chose a site for this house in a vacant lot which happened to be across the road from the king. He hired craftsmen who worked. In no time at all, a beautiful fairy tale palace came into being. Now the king of that country had a little daughter, about the same age as the woodcutter's daughter. And one morning she was in the front of the house there and looking out the window, and she noticed that this marvelous building had come into being across the way from their house. And she said, she sent some of the guards to find out what happened, and they came back and told her that, someone in the jewelry business had built this house, but maybe their history wasn't so good. There were talk about his past, and they didn't really know much, but they did tell her that, he has a little daughter about your age. Well, the princess was very angry about this, and she called for the woodcutter's daughter to come over. But it's the way of young girls, mostly, that they soon became fast friends. And they used to go bathing in this garden pond in the back that her father had built for her. Well, one afternoon while they were going to bathe, the princess had this beautiful necklace that was given to her by her father. And before she dove into the pool, she took it off, and what did she do? She hung it in a tree. All right, there we go. Well, that night, the princess and her father were eating dinner, and the king said, "Daughter, what happened to that necklace I gave you on your birthday? You wear it all the time." She goes, "Wow, gee, I don't know. I had it when I was bathing with that girl from across the street, and I don't know what happened to it, I think maybe she stole it, She's not one of us. She's not royalty or a wealthy capitalist, Well, the king was very angry, and he called the guards, and he had the woodcutter arrested, thrown into prison, confiscated his property, and sent the woodcutter's daughter, the little girl, to an orphanage. Well, it was a custom in that country after a time in prison that prisoners would be exhibited to the public, and so was the woodcutter. They took him out of jail, and they took him down to the town square, and they chained him to a post there in the town square with a big wooden sign around his neck, a hole that couldn't scratch his head or eat or anything. And the sign said, "This is what happens to people who steal from kings." So the old man sat there by his post day after day, and sometimes people gave him scraps of food, and sometimes they didn't. And this is the way he passed his days, day after day. One day when the woodcutter was sitting there in the hot sun chained to his post, he happened to hear a couple of merchants talking, and one of them says, "You know, it's Thursday afternoon, I have an important meeting to get to." And into the woodcutter's mind said, "Oh, it's Thursday, it's the day of Muskil, Gusha, and I've forgotten to tell the story for so long, because, you know, we are forgetful people in our lives." No sooner had this thought crossed his mind than there was a merchant rode by on his horse. Now this merchant had sunk all his money in ships to the Orient. And his creditors were after him, and he was pretty worried guy. But as he looked at the old man chained to his post there in the hot sun, he said, "You know, I have a lot of troubles, but man, this guy, you know, he doesn't have anything. He's just dependent on the goodwill of people." And so he looked in his purse and he gave him a coin. And the old man took the coin and said, "Oh, generous friend, thank you so much, but this money is of no good to me. People would just think I stole it, but if your generosity would extend to going to that stall over there and buying a few dates and sit and eat them with me, I'd be very grateful." So the merchant went and he bought some dates, and he sat there with the old man and they ate the dates. And then the old man told the merchant the story of Muskil Gusha. Well, the merchant got up and went on his way thinking, that guy's been in the sun too long. He's really crazy. That story doesn't do anything or go anywhere. But, you know, as he crested the hill over the harbor, he saw his ships coming in, flags flying, drummers at the prow, playing drums, and they were loaded with silks and spices of the Orient. Yeah. But he leaves our story here. Well, the next day, the princess went out in the afternoon to the garden pond there in the back of the palace. And just as she was going to dive in, she saw what she thought was her necklace reflected in the water. She went, there it is, I'm going to dive in and get it. As she was looking at its reflection in the water, she happened to sneeze. She threw her head back. And there was her necklace hanging in the tree above her head. She thought was her necklace was only its reflection. So she ran to her father. Father, look. Oh, I spilled the water.
I knew what was going.
I found the necklace. The little girl across the street didn't steal it at all. So, the king had the woodcutter reinstated to his property, and he had invested some money in it, so he got the interest too. The daughter was brought back from the orphanage. And they all lived happily ever after, except for those that didn't. So these are some of the incidents in the story of Muskil Gusha. It's a long story. It takes many forms. So sometimes it's not recognized as the story of Muskil Gusha. But it's through the work of the people that hear the story and repeat it on Thursday nights that the people in real need will always find their way. As the story's been told, so it shall always be told. And now the question is, will you repeat the story of Muskil Gusha on Thursday night to help the needy?